South Korea will not hesitate to take stern military measures against North Korea if the North crosses the line with its balloon campaign, Seoul's military has warned. Now, what kind of measures and how long will the North continue to push its reckless actions? Let's turn to Professor Brian Myers this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, South Korea's military vowing to press ahead with stern military action should the regime go too far with these trash-carrying balloons. What kind of measures do you think are possible, Brian Myers?
Well, the military was really vague about it, and there's a reason for that. It just doesn't have very many options. They can't shoot the balloons down over South Korea because an unknown payload that's just dropping straight down might cause even more damage. They can't be fired down over the DMZ without the risk of sparking an exchange of fire. And if that's out, I think stern military action is likely to mean fighting propaganda with propaganda. In other words, by maybe installing more loudspeakers along the DMZ. I think at some stage, the South Korean military might begin contemplating sending equally large numbers of balloons into North Korea. But I think most people here would probably consider that an excessive measure.
Don't these balloons already pose a great threat to the safety of people here in the South? I mean, some balloons have already gone on fire, causing damage.
Well, that's true, but I think we need to keep some perspective here. You know, in the past 20 years, North Korea has bombarded a South Korean island. It sank a ship. It shot a South Korean tourist, and it shot a fisheries official who happened to float over the NLL. It planted a mine, which maimed 2 young soldiers. And South Korea took no serious countermeasures after any of those outrages. So in view of this history, I sure don't expect the South Korean military to take serious action now because, say, 1 out of every 1,000 or so trash balloons has sparked a small fire or delayed airplane flights at Incheon. But I think Kim Jong-un should be aware that if a forest fire is caused, for example, or any fire that results in a loss of life, I think the South would probably take this propaganda battle to the next level, which is something maybe he doesn't want.
Well, that's why there are growing calls that South Korea, some people say, should seek, damages for the North's continuous flying of these balloons. How realizable is this, do you think?
There's absolutely no chance of that. For one thing, North Korea would never pay a penny. And second, even if South Korea were able to get its hands on North Korean funds, there are a lot of people here whose loved ones were killed or abducted by the North Koreans, and they're going to have to be compensated before anybody else. And finally, the North could well seek compensatory damages for the balloons which South Korean NGOs have been sending into its territory over the years. So I'm afraid that's just not really very realistic.
Well, Professor Myers, I do have to point out it's been nearly 4 months since these balloons have flown into the South here. The question is, when will it stop?
Well, North Korea is always unpredictable, so the balloons could stop at any time. But I think the regime wants to see if South Korea takes any action to prevent those South Korean NGOs from continuing to launch their balloons. I think if such a measure were to be taken, it might give Kim Jong-un a face-saving way out of all this.
Well, South Korea's National Security Advisor Shin Won-sik said in an interview yesterday on Monday that North Korea's 7th nuclear test is possible around the time of the U.S. presidential election in November. Do you also think so, or highly unlikely? What do you think?
Well, I think it's possible because Kim is very committed to carrying out his 5-year plan for strengthening the country's military. And of course, the nuclear program is at the center of that plan, which is now in its 4th year. So he may well feel it's time for that 7th nuclear test because it's been 7 years since the last one. But I don't think he would conduct the test in an effort to influence the American elections because such an event would give no clear advantage or disadvantage to either candidate, either to Trump or Harris. So I think that if it does take place, it will be because the nuclear program's internal timetable dictates it.
Professor Myers, before I let you go, my colleague Bae Eun-ji just reported the foreign ministers of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan met in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Do you think their commitment to, keep their trilateral cooperation going will keep, the regime in check?
I don't think so. If it does, it will only be for a few years until the next South Korean administration comes in. This is the uncertainty in the alliance. We don't know how long this trilateral cooperation is going to continue.
Right, because there are political transitions in Washington and Tokyo, and sooner or
And in
later
Seoul,
there
yeah.
will be a change of leadership in South Korea as well.
Right.
Alrighty, Professor Myers, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.